This is a regular scene, and this is a watercolor painting, and what if I told you it was created entirely inside of Blender in just a few minutes? Blender's painterly effects are known for being a nightmare. They always require painting everything yourself manually or an overwhelming maze of nodes that are impossible to understand. And every time I've tried making my own, I've given up because it was way too much effort for the result. But recently I discovered a simple, beginner-friendly way of creating effects like this that has barely any nodes at all and is super customizable. In this video, I'll guide you through 3 key steps: realistic paint strokes, a pencil-like outline, and even a papery effect that brings everything together. By the end, you'll not only be able to recreate this effect, but you'll have a foundation to create your own unique styles on Blender. Before we start, I just wanted to say a quick thank you. We're closing in on 10,000 subscribers, which is a milestone I never thought I'd hit when I started out. If you stick around, this video might just inspire you to hit that subscribe button too. Now let's dive in. When I started on this project, there was already something working against me: Eevee and cycles and their realism. Blender's designed for photorealism by default, which is great for most projects, but not this one. But luckily, I found a workaround that saved me a lot of time later on and made the whole thing way easier. First, set up a scene that you like and head to the compositing tab to do some quick setup. Change the bottom window down here to a 3D viewport and click Use Nodes up here. In the bottom window, go into Camera View and hit this little down arrow and choose Camera under Compositing. This will let us see what we're doing in the compositor while we're in the camera view. And that's all the setup we need to do. Now we can get started on the most satisfying part of the whole process. Without this step, the end result would look nothing like a painting, and surprisingly, it's literally one node, but it's the most important part of the whole project. So what is it? Hit Shift A and search for the Kuwahara node and add it like this. After doing that, your image should turn kind of blurry and look a bit like a painting. But there's a huge problem. When I was making this project, I knew that the Kuwahara node kind of turned things into paintings, which I thought would be really useful, but I almost gave up when I realized this was how it looked. Luckily, I found a fix that helped out not only now, but also down the road. And all you need to do is tweak some settings. First, change Classic to Anisotropic if that's how you pronounce it, and change the other values like this. Feel free to set them yourself too, but I found that these looked good. However, it seemed way too clear, so I changed the size value down here to somewhere around 8 to 10. And with that out of the way, we're done with the painterly look, all with literally one node instead of dozens. But right now I could not show this to someone and have them believe it's watercolor. To fix that, we have just 2 more steps, and the first one uses a technique that can be applied not only in compositing, but literally anywhere where there are nodes, to create effects as far-ranging as comic book shaders. Today we'll use it to create an outline to make our object look hand-drawn. To start, add another filter node and change it to Sobel or Sobel, however you pronounce it, which lets you perform edge detection on an image. If I plug my image into it, you can see that it's picking up every little edge right now. But wait, there's way too much going on. It's picking up details that we don't even want. This is where that earlier technique comes in handy, and trust me, it's a game changer. The edges we want are in white, which is good, but everything else is there too. To fix that, create a color ramp node. If you're a beginner and haven't used it before, it basically just maps colors onto a set range based on how bright or saturated they are. To understand better, I'll draw it out for you. On our flower, these white lines are really bright, which is good, meaning that on the range of the color ramp, they fall near the top. But these little lines that we don't want fall somewhere near the bottom over here. The thing about the color ramp is that we can change the range to ignore certain brightnesses. If I slide this black slider up, those darker colors that were on gray are suddenly on black, meaning they disappear. But the lighter colors stay because I left the top the same. But how do we use these values to add the outlines? Luckily, Blender makes doing it really easy and really satisfying as well. Basically, what we're going to do is add an outline where our color is white and add the original image back where it's black. And we only need one node for that again, the mix node. Connect the color ramp into the factor input and your image into the top color. The factor controls how much of each color we use. A higher value means the bottom color and a lower value means the upper color. Like I said, where our image was white, it uses this bottom color, and where it was black, it uses our original image. The last thing to do is changing the white color to something dark so we can actually see the outline. And now we're already at the last step. Now I know I said earlier that the paint strokes are the most important part, but now that I'm thinking about it, this next thing might be more core to the watercolor look. And luckily, it's also really easy to do, and when it's done, the scene becomes a believable watercolor painting. It's the icing on the cake here. What we have now looks kind of like a painting, but I still couldn't show this to a friend and say I painted it. but in a few seconds I'll reveal what brings it from 70% to 100%. Between these two images, the difference is obvious. It's almost impossible to find a watercolor painting that does not have this papery texture to it, because that's how they have to be made. Even oil paintings have that bumpy look to them, and Blender is not made for painting in the 3D viewport by default. But like with how we broke Blender's realism, we can find a way around this too. Start by finding a flat image of watercolor paper. If you don't have the time to find one online, I've linked some in the description. Create an image node in Blender, and now all we have to do is mix it with the scene. If you hadn't guessed it already, make a mix node and plug the paper into the bottom and the original image into the top. But because it looks awful right now, change mix to multiply. This changes how the computer handles blending between the two colors. And finally, even though what we have now looks great, there's just one more thing to make it really pop. Without this, it's easy to see that your image is made in Blender and not painted in real life, and it's quick and really easy to do. One benefit about doing this all in the compositing tab is that we can customize the colors of the whole image instead of just the individual materials in our scene. To do that, just add a color correction node here. The settings are pretty easy to figure out, but for every scene I did this effect on, the colors needed to be adjusted differently. I found that more saturated values look better, and lowering the levels of the shadows provides some nice contrast. And if you want to take it to the maximum possible level, you can add another color ramp by your paper texture and crank up the black on it. Connect it to a displace node like this, and now your image will get shifted over a little bit where your paper texture is white, and not at all where it's black. This just gives everything even more of a jagged texture because paintbrushes will not make perfectly straight lines. And that's it. This video was closer to the side of more artistic and non-real renders. But on the other side of things, if you've ever struggled with realistic renders, maybe you watched this video because of that, watch this video next. I go over how to create materials with depth and roughness, and even create custom skies that you can use to light your scenes. There's a lot of great stuff in there, so check it out.